Hello, hello, Margaret, if you're here.
For more than 2 decades, I have written in a diary almost every single day. And guess what? I saved them all. Each week, I will be reading from these archives and getting to know myself from the lens of my 10, 16, 25, and 36-year-old self. We'll explore big topics such as body image, queerness, divorce, addiction, mental health, and friendship. I'll read cringy poems and attempt to find compassion for the painful tenderness of my younger self. Join the drama of me and my guests as we explore our boy-crazy, closeted, angsty selves, one stupid page at a time. Welcome to the Angsty Pod, JP. I'm so excited.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yes.
You and I have wonderful meetings at least twice a month.
Yes.
And to get to indulge in a creative endeavor is going to be so much fun because we do it all the time. So now we get to share it with the world.
I know. I'm so excited. This was kind of born out of the last meeting we had, actually, where I was, 3/4 of the way through our call. And I was like, you should come on my podcast. It's like I couldn't not say it. It had to come out. And you immediately said yes. And I was super pumped about that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Do you like podcasts? Do you listen to podcasts a lot?
So I'm not a podcast person. I never really fell into the niche of it. I feel like I would benefit from them if I figured out a way to kind of incorporate it into my co-working. But I'm just very distractible. So if I'm listening to a podcast while I'm trying to get something done, usually more often than not, I'm going to end up just focusing on the podcast and not getting what needs to get done. Because I will just get so fascinated by what people are talking about. And especially nowadays, there's such an array of topics.
Yeah,
that,
totally.
I don't know. I'm very much a music guy. Music I can jam out to and still stay focused.
Nice.
So.
Yeah, I'm kind of the opposite in the sense that I listen to podcasts most commonly when I'm walking. I take my dog for 2 walks a day, but also working out and driving and cleaning. Those are I'm pretty much doing one of those things most of the time. So other than work hours. Right. Yeah. So I listen to a lot of podcasts. And one thing that I love about my podcast is that I do a lot of solo episodes, which means obviously I have creative control, but I love having guests because lately my podcast has been real serious. I've been kind of reading my journals chronologically, and I've taken a couple detours and stuff to go out of order. But right now in the series, in the chronological order, I am 14 going on 15. I've just lost my virginity. And
Wowza.
And I'm in this relationship with basically my first serious boyfriend, the person I lost my virginity to. He was a couple years older than me. We were heavily into pot smoking, drinking, partying, and my entire life I've looked back on that relationship thinking of all the men I've encountered in my life, he was actually not that bad. I always associated this person with kind of a purity, because he's kind of frozen as a young person in my, he was 16, 17 kind of thing. And he's kind of frozen as this kind of boyish, innocent, youthful memory. But of course, now that I'm reading these journals, I'm like, oh, damn, he toxic as fuck. I'm literally reading back on these journals being I had no idea, even though I was living it, not only living it, but writing it down. And I just had no idea until now. And I'm like, oh my God, that was such a bad relationship.
Times were very, very different then.
True.
The standard for relationships and what people were expected, how men and women were expected to show up in a heteronormative relationship was very misogynistic at the time, just inherently, And so, I think it's very interesting to look back at our previous romantic partners and think about what we put up with.
Oh, yeah. And that's, I think I feel a little bit, I think betrayed is too strong of a word, but I feel a little, like, I have this overwhelming feeling of, like, I really didn't know myself then, you know? Like, reading back on stuff I've written from that age, I feel really, like, almost like it's a stranger in the sense that I've forgotten so much and there's so much I was unaware of. But again, I was aware of it enough because I wrote a lot of it down. But it's almost like I wrote it down and then chose to forget about it.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that because I relate to that a lot.
Yeah.
And it's interesting for me because I didn't journal. I was just writing poetry because I guess I just thought I was Edgar Allan Poe, like, from the get-go. I was that emo. Just skip the journaling phase, right? No collages here. I started in high school and I started writing poetry when I was dating girls. So this was before I even came out and before I even started to explore my queerness and that part of my identity. I was attending a Catholic high school in Kentucky. That is part of the Bible Belt. So that's what I was referencing in the bios. For anyone that doesn't know, it's basically just alludes to a very religious area of the United States.
Yes.
But so it's very interesting to see, like, go back and just kind of like reflect on who you were as a person at that time. And I go back and I read certain things that I feel like I was almost writing to myself in the future so I wouldn't forget. But I don't necessarily have like memories of them. Like, I'm very detached from certain phases. You know what I mean?
I do. That's a great word to use, actually. I feel detached from that version of myself. And I think this whole experience, not the podcast, but just reading my past writing in general, is almost like this craving I have to, like, I guess, become connected again to that version of myself, because she needs so much love. Holy shit, she needs so much love. And I'm finding in some ways that's part of like the benefits of having a podcast like this, but also it's been hard work, man. It's been like really heavy lifting. It's been, most of the times where I've taken a detour, it's because I'm almost like not sick of myself. That's like a harsh way to say it, but I'm just kind of like, come on, Yoda, like, you know, like, let's, like, I just want to shake myself and be like, don't you see it? Can't you see that this boy is no good for you? And it's funny because, of course, the adults in my life, the people who are older and wiser than me, were doing that, like shaking me and being like, can't you see this boy isn't good for you? Did I listen? No. Would I listen if I went back and did it again? No.
Nope.
But yeah.
Hey, but experience is life's best teacher, you know?
Yeah, of course.
I've learned my most valuable life lessons from some of the biggest mistakes that I've made. Well, maybe mistake is not the best word, but trial and error.
Yeah, yeah. Well, speaking of some lessons that you learned, obviously, you and I work together in kind of an editor-poet capacity, and maybe we can share a little bit about how we met, because I think we do have a lot of friends in common, and people might not know how we met. So we actually haven't been friends for that long, but I think it's been a very natural friendship. We met almost a year ago exactly, because we met halfway through April last year. And the reason I remember that is because we were both in Unfold, which, for anyone who's listening, that is an amazing workshop run by our mutual pal Tristan Richards. It happens in NaPoWriMo, and the goal is you're going to write 30 poems in 30 days, attend a workshop a day, and make a poem. And I had been in the workshop, you know, kind of attending when I could. Some of the workshops I couldn't attend. And then partway through the month, this new person joined, JP, and I was like, who is this human? Like, just kind of, because it was a big group, and you can't get to know everybody, but you kind of find your people in the big group, and you joined, and I was just like, I was immediately just in awe and of your writing, and just was like, I just loved the storytelling, and one of the things I noticed about you right away was like not shying from heavy subject matter in your writing, and sometimes softening it with beautiful metaphor and imagery, which is, I mean, I think it's such a kindness when we're writing about those hard subject matters to be able to do that. Tell me a little bit about where you were at when we met last year. Like
First of all, I want to say you're so sweet.
Oh, thank you.
it felt very surreal to hear you say that, like, we hadn't been friends for that long. I almost like instinctually interjected. I'm like, yes, we have.
And then you're like, no, actually, no, we haven't.
I mean, time isn't real. We talk about that all the time. Like, read our poems, okay? But
yeah, exactly.
It's just a testament to how natural the progression of our friendship has been. And I do feel like you do find those people that you gravitate towards in real life and in online communities as well. And I had really just started to go full throttle into like the writing workshop and just developing a daily writing practice. I mean, I didn't really consider myself a poet. I would say even then, and I'm so glad that I joined the second half of Unfold and joined Resolution in January, because that was my first ever workshop. Because it really did just change the trajectory of my life, because I started to look at vocation versus career, you know, and what is going to like fulfill my soul as well as my bank account, hopefully, you know. And I'm not sitting here saying that I'm a self-funded writer. No, I still have another job, but I get to engage with other poets and meet wonderful people like Yoda, and come to find out, like, as the more we work together, we have so much in common. It's actually bonkers. We're like basically the same age. We've been sober for almost the same exact amount of time. Have gone through so many similar life experiences, have similar parental dynamics. It's just very interesting, the similarities that we have. And that's one of the great things too that I know you and I have kind of both bonded over from the beginning too, is the fact that we have this writing from so long ago. We're talking about 20 years ago here.
Yep.
So it's just been, I just remember the gratitude that you and I both shared in like one of our first meetings about being able to still access this stuff.
Yeah.
And
I could not,
so I want to say to you, like, while it's hard to read, and I know you said you get sick of yourself, like, no, I don't think anybody listening is sick of it.
I will never forget when you shared your, like, your catalog of old, like, writings. You had this blog where you had it all published and saved. And I was like, I thought I had this, I mean, I do have this treasure trove of archived writing from, I started, the first journal that I can find, I don't know if it's the first journal I ever wrote in, but the first one that I thought to keep was from 1998. So I'm 10. And that's the first journal I read on this podcast. It's kind of what led me to creating this podcast, is because I found that journal and I was like, oh my God, this is pure gold. Like, this is like where I don't need therapy anymore. I have this, you know, and actually it turns out I need more therapy now. But I remember in one of our first calls when you shared your sort of treasure chest of this poetry that you've been writing for, like, there's these time capsules of like these formative years. Yep. And so for you, it was obviously like a lot has happened in that time, like being, going through addiction, going through relationships, going through loss, going through health stuff, coming out, like finding, like discovering your identity. And all of that is kind of marked by poetry that you've written that you can now access. Like, I think about shout
out to the internet for being an inherent archive at its core.
Yeah.
That is the way that I've been able to keep the treasure trove, and I have it all like archived and saved now, but thank you, internet.
Yeah, well, I was going to say shout out to Dead Journal, which is where a lot of my stuff is archived.
I had a live journal, so mine was alive, yours was dead, so you were more emo.
So, yeah, we made fun of people with live journals because we were like, oh, you're not emo enough for a dead journal. Like, that's how emo I was. I think we do need to compare some photos from the years. Like, I want to see what JP looked like in 2001. Because
I got you. I got some good ones.
I was so goth. Like, I was, like, honestly, I look back on it now and I'm like, you were such a cutie. Like, what a cutie patootie. But also, I just hated myself. Like, I was, the amount of self-loathing could have literally, like, burnt a house down. You know
oh my gosh, I could have built one and then burnt it down again with that self-loathing. Let me tell you about it.
When do you think you, like, do you remember the first poem you wrote, or like when you started writing? How old you might have been?
Yes. So I would say the first like time I intentionally sat down to like write a poem, I was 13.
Okay.
And it was about actually Matthew Shepard, the queer man that was tied to a fence and murdered. And so I think it was part of the exploration of like my identity and what queerness was in my life, because I was really affected by that.
Yeah.
And I remember it was a rhyming poem. I don't know how you can write a rhyming poem about something so horrendous, but I don't know, I made it work, you know? Edgar Allan Poe.
So, what poems are you going to read for us, JP? You have so many.
I know. It was very interesting to go back and think that over. Because like you said, they kind of exist in these little like time capsules. Because there were long breaks between periods that I was writing, because I was very sick at the time. I had a very severe eating disorder that I needed to get residential treatment to quite literally save my life. At the time, I didn't realize, you know, it was life-saving, or, you know, I didn't, you know, denial.
Yeah.
It comes with the territory. But I think I'm going to start kind of in that era. So these pieces are very either related to like pain involving like eating disorder, self-image, identity, or about my mom, because she also had recently undergone radiation therapy for thyroid cancer.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a lot, you know.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
Yeah. And how old are you? Like, what years are these from?
So these would be from 2006. And I graduated high school in 2007. So I would be 16, 17. I was always young. I have an August birthday. So I was like the young one in my grade. But, yeah.
So you'd been writing poems for like a couple years, because you said your first one was when you were like 13. And you've got a lot of life stuff like weighing you down, a lot going on familially, a lot going on with your health, a lot going on internally.
Yeah, with the identity stuff, you know, dating girls, you know, being alternative at a Catholic high school. We had a dress code, and so it was relatively lenient, but it was khakis and polo, and I would wear like bowling shoes to school because, you know, I had to subvert the dress code somehow. Or I had like really cool belts. Like I was really into like neon colors.
Oh, cool.
So I had this like neon, like, you know, I think it had like a belt buckle that was a seatbelt buckle. Remember when those were popular?
Oh my gosh, I definitely had one of those. I had a rainbow one of those, like full rainbow That's, oh my gosh, throwback.
Yeah. Mine was neon green. So
that's amazing.
Yes, we are kindred spirits.
I know. I do like to think that we would have been friends then, but again,
absolutely.
you're like you said, like queer kid living in Kentucky, going to Catholic school. Like our lives could not have been more different in that sense, but we were dressing the same. So I find that pretty endearing. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
all right,
so it's very interesting. This one I'm going to read. This is a poem that I still love to this day. It's called Seaworthy, and it is like the last poem that I wrote before I went to my first treatment stint. Okay. And I ended up going back 2 more times, and I spent over like 7 months total at this place.
Wow.
And it saved my life. Like, it was not bad treatment. It was residential, like, I don't know, saved my life for sure. But I was gone for, you know, holidays, lots of things. So anyways, this is called Seaworthy.
Awesome.
It was written on July 17th, 2006, and it is a 2-parter. 1. I took to rinsing my stomach like a fat peach in July, yet you took to shaping me, mining me like coal from my surroundings. You told me that summer had to be the best time of year to rot in peace, so I believed you. The sea barnacled my body after that and halved me like apples until it discovered seeds at my core. But honestly, you can shake me quick like sand through a sifter, and I'll still just blend. 2. Now butchers, come to me and rid me of my insides, because I have fasted for months and it has begun to bear down on my body. End of poem.
Wow. It's so, I can't tell if it's because it's your voice reading, or like, because obviously I've heard you read a lot of poems, more than a lot of people, arguably, because, you know, every other week you read me like several poems. So I know your voice really well. And this is like so much in your voice. And I don't know if it's just because it's literally your cadence, or if it's like, because obviously you've changed and grown so much since 2006. You're like a different human. But
Yep.
it's so very much, I could, if this was in a lineup, I think I could be like, that's a JP poem. Like, 100%.
See, and that is just music to my ears because, well, yeah, if I look back at this person felt identityless and very lost, you know? Mm-hmm. And so to think that I had a poetic voice at the time is kind of a beautiful juxtaposition.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way. I think because when I was that age, I was also writing a lot of poetry, but I don't think I had a poetic voice. I think I was trying really hard to rhyme and be as dramatic as humanly possible. I don't think I had like a clear mission for any poem. It was very theatrical, but this one I get a real sense of like your sadness. And I'm curious about the you, because there's a you in the poem. Who's the you?
So whenever there's a you, in a lot of these earlier poems, I'm actually addressing the eating disorder as its own entity. When you go through like cognitive behavioral therapy for disordered eating, they kind of teach you to separate that part of your brain out because it is essentially a voice that's going to live in your head forever. So you have to learn to challenge it. And that is a lot of the time the you. I think I was definitely like in my surrealistic era. But I did, you know, I had started to date boys shortly after, like within this period, I had started to come out a little bit and I got my first boyfriend. And so I grabbed quite a few poems about him and you know, early love and figuring out queerness and stuff too. Yeah,
well, we'd love to hear one of those.
Oh, absolutely.
I just want to sidebar. Sorry, one quick thing before. I was thinking when you were saying the you is often like the disorder itself. For myself, I think of my recovery from alcoholism, and I heard once in a meeting to like kind of like name your alcoholism as something that's like really just someone you don't want around, you know, like you're not romanticizing it. You're not naming your alcoholism like Oscar Wilde or something. Like you're naming it what it is. And so I named my alcoholism Barb because I had this bully when I was like a young adult. This woman full on bullied me, and her name was Barb, and she was just a total asshole of a human. And so when I think of like what's gonna make me like, who do I not want to bump into ever? It's Barb. So it's like Barb. That's who I named my my alcoholism after. And like I don't use it very often, but every once in a while I'll literally be just sitting there and I'll be like, fucking Barb. Like
Barb, know? Fuck off. Like I do not need to have a random tiny craving right now.
Exactly,
like,
exactly. So that's really funny.
Yeah. So I think it was very fun to write about, at least in that way too, because you know there's a lot of secrecy within disordered eating, and it was a way for me to literally vent about it without sitting there and being like, this is a poem about anorexia nervosa.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, for sure.
Because we're not doing all that.
Yeah.
But going to treatment, where I went to a hospital called Rogers Memorial Hospital, and it was in Wisconsin. So that was my first introduction to the Midwest and cold weather and insane winters. And they had this lake there. And so the lake imagery a lot of the imagery that starts to get incorporated into my poems comes from real life. And I still draw on my real life experiences. And I really still find that I enjoy to like blur that line of like letting the reader wonder, am I being an unreliable narrator, or did this actually happen? You know, because there's a lot of stuff throughout my life like that did actually happen. And like I told you, I feel like sometimes I was writing to almost my future self to remind myself, like, you've been here before. It's okay. Like, you'll get through it.
Yeah. No, I think there's something really, really powerful in that, to be like, although I enjoy making it a little bit ambiguous to the reader, as a person who's experienced this, I actually want and need to know the truth. And one way we can do that is kind of, maybe not this, but like sometimes dropping little sort of secret messages for yourself in a poem. Like I find myself doing that every once in a while. And I think, you know, of course my editor is like, I don't get that reference. And I'm like, that's okay. You don't need to. It's not for you. It's for like 10 years ago or 10 years from now, me. Right. I didn't know I was doing that when I was young, but I can see how I'm doing it now.
Yep.
Yeah.
For sure. And something I love within poetic writing is a serial metaphor. If you're reading a certain writer, especially a established writer that has a huge collection of work that is accessible, you start to feel like you get to know a person through some of the things that they continually reference and bring up. Yep. And that's something that I feel like I got to kind of reflect on pieces of myself that I probably would have maybe forgotten, you know, if I didn't have this writing. So
how can you tell the difference between like when you're, you know, using that as a tool, like repeating something in a poem from, you know, 2010 and then again in 2015 and then again today, you're repeating, say, a phrase or an image. How can you tell that you're using that as a tool that's intentional versus just being repetitive?
That's a great question. I think it ultimately comes down to intentionality, kind of what you were talking about with this idea of poetic voice, and when you were just doing the AB, simple rhyming type stuff. It's rather than trying to force it, it just kind of incorporates naturally, and I think it's something that transforms over time too. Just like a person, it's like when you run into someone you haven't seen in 5 to 10 years, but you know you played soccer together for 5 years back in grade school. You're gonna recognize that person, but they're not gonna be the same person.
Okay, I understand. So you're reusing the heart of the image, but maybe not the whole image itself. Perhaps.
Correct. I don't think that I could sit there and write 60 poems about the same singular event. Yeah. I could maybe try. And there are poets that could, and I admire them, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I suppose in some ways, like, that's themed collections, like people who are working on theme full-length collections, like the one that I'm publishing in a couple days is, you know, all about my...
So soon.
I know. It's all about, my best friend's car accident, and... there are so many poems that I have gone back and forth on of saying, am I just saying the same thing again in different words? Is this, you and I talk a lot about this, is this 2 poems perhaps? Or is it maybe even 3 poems instead of 1? Or are these 2 pieces actually 1 poem? And that's something I think that that's kind of why I'm honing in on this, is because I kind of struggle with that too, of like wanting to kind of explore something until you physically don't need to explore it anymore. Something like, for example, my alcoholism, it's never going away. It just changes. So I'm always going to write about it. And making that also not like the center thing that I'm known for. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be just like the poet who just writes about Barb all the time. But I do find myself returning to it so much. And I know there's like a couple big subject matters that you find yourself returning to. But I think that's kind of like... I suppose in some ways all poets or even writers in general, I guess, probably have that, because it's what you're passionate about. What you've been through is like what you know. So
I will say, like, there's definitely been periods of time too where I have been unable to write about something. And I have had to get to a point in my life where like I'm emotionally stable enough to revisit that subject and then go through the catharsis. But it is nice when both can happen simultaneously.
Yeah.
You can process through writing. So the piece is May 4th, 2007. So we had a time jump.
Yeah.
So we're in a whole new era. This is the month I was supposed to graduate from high school. And I did graduate. I just didn't walk because I wasn't there. Then the poem is called Proper. All right. Today I sit here with the worms at my feet. Better, or supposedly cured of the blue hand that had palmed me. And yes, I still listen as you try to explain the difference between white bones and eggshells, screaming pigs and thighs, but realize that I am finally full, finally. Oh, how I tried to imagine the contrast of people on paper, or that one person stepping past the length of Morse's pond. Better now, having shaken the needles and the leeches and the wires. Oh, just imagine the faces turning towards the west as if following an old crow, the blood-colored sky still longing to be blacked out. Here, now, I am all fingers, reaching for everything, spelling out, I am, because I have the right to. For months, I was left in piles like leaves rotting and off-colored, as senseless as bats.
Wow, snaps. I don't know if my mic can even pick up my snaps, but there we go. That's beautiful. I noticed something. I don't know if I've heard you read this poem before, but I noticed one of those images because I remember it because I asked you about it, the blue hand, which appears in another one of your poems, I think. And I asked you about it, and because it is a beautiful, like, image, and it's one of those kind of hidden, what's the word I'm looking for? What's that word for, like, when you're dropping something before? Easter egg. It's like a little Easter egg. Yep. For another poem down the line. So, yeah, I love that.
And it's a kind of very ambiguous reference to a symptom of anorexia, which is obviously you get very, very terrible circulation, but in very severe cases, your hands and your feet will start to turn blue. And you will also, people will start to grow this like kind of like fuzzy bird-like feather. It's the kind of thing, like a downy coat, because they're so malnourished. Yeah. It's very interesting to kind of like see that imagery in there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it goes to show that like the things that I've read of yours, and I know other people feel the same way, like really land. Like you really remember a lot of the images that you create. So thanks so much for sharing that poem. You said that was the first one that you'd written outside of residential treatment?
Yep. So I went to residential treatment, and I was back within a month, because the first time I went, I didn't even think that I had an eating disorder. I quite literally told them, I was like, I'm just here to like gain some weight.
Yeah.
And I'm doing okay. And so I did what they told me to do.
Red flag.
I gained a bunch of weight, and I somehow convinced them I was fine. You know, I'm sure I was a great manipulator at the time. And I went home, and then I relapsed and was back within like a month and a week. So so that all happened in the same time. So this is technically 2 treatment stints, but they were so close together that it felt like one. And this was after this is the first time I spent like Thanksgiving and Christmas away from home, because this was written January 29th of 2007. Yeah.
Wow, that's I mean, you missed out on a lot of like life while you were in residential treatment, but obviously at the cost of saving your life.
Yep. I think about it a lot.
Yeah, such a hard thing for especially a young person to go through.
Yes. And I think that the treatment system, it can be incredibly valuable and life-saving, but there's also so many places that are just run wrong. Mm-hmm. And I feel horrible for a lot of the kids, that get like caught with like a bag of weed and then get sent to like a year-long, very religious based kind of program or something like that. I just met so many different kinds of people throughout the different types of treatment that I went to that had some very, very, very seriously drastic experiences.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm grateful that the ones that I had were not ever that drastic or that serious. The most like intensive one I was ever at was a wilderness treatment center, and I actually just started to explore kind of that chapter of my life, and I wrote a poem about it.
I know exactly which one you're talking about. I hope you'll share that one too, maybe.
Yeah, that'd be a great way to kind of like go full circle.
Yeah. Well, what else have you got for us, JP? What I would love to hear, and this is like kind of for. It's
I think I know, but say it.
Well, I want to hear a love poem. Like I want to hear.
Oh.
I want to hear a love poem.
Okay. Before that, I'm gonna give you an angsty.
Okay. Of course, because these two cannot exist without each other. Maybe I'll read... Okay, let's do this. You read your angstiest poem, then I'll read my angstiest poem, and we'll compete and see who's the angstiest.
Ooh, okay, because here's the one caveat. So I was like never afraid to like put a name in a poem.
Yeah.
Most of them are in the title. If you're in the title of my poem, you were getting called out essentially in some way. You wronged me.
Yeah.
And this poem is just called Kelly. So it's
damn.
Oh yeah, Kelly. It's basically my poem to Barb.
Oh shit.
But no, she was a friend that just kind of fucked me over.
Okay.
Just was inherently a bad person.
Oh, Kelly. So worst.
Yes. It's focused angst. All right, Kelly, June 12th, 2007. You were predictable. All bitch and hair grease with a mouth like the open water you would just spill. And sometimes I could catch you giving back the letters, but only because they made you feel. All I wanted was for you to grow into something beautiful. Yet I leave you senseless at least 4 times a week with the past still somehow behind you. Sick but pretty, you make the most of people. Pick out their black tongues and use them over and over like they are the reason why you hate the early morning or any morning when you wake up and remember that the truth still owns you.
Ouch! Ouchie!
Right? And you know she read
it. Oh my god. That's like... Ooh, okay. Yeah. That, like, I was trying to remember lines because I was like, I need to, like, put that on a Post-it somewhere when I'm doing, like, rage practice. But I also, every line was like, oh, that's the line. Like, that's so good. It's, like, acutely so, I can, angsty, very, very angsty. Okay, this one's mine. This one's a rhyming one. No date, because I didn't date my poems, but this is definitely written sometime between the ages of like 14 and 16. And by the way, on the backs of the pages of my poems, I usually write like, this poem I wrote about so-and-so because of this.
You did your own author's notes.
A little bit. This one on the back,
that.
This one on the back, it just says one word. It says,
what?
Payback.
Oh my God. I'm ready. Give me payback.
This is titled, I Hope You Cry. When you're laughing and having fun, remember I am too. I cry for you no longer. And when you're putting me down behind my back, I no longer care because I'm so much stronger. When you're with your new girl and it doesn't feel right, I hope you think of me and pray. And when you're sitting by yourself, I hope you regret how much you wasted my days. When you see me smiling with someone else, I hope you hurt inside because they mean so much to me. And if you ever find Sorry, this is so dramatic. And if you ever find a 4-leaf clover, I hope you waste your wish and wish to be freed from me. And when the salt runs down your face, I won't be there to wash it away. I hope you start to cry even harder and regret all the things you forgot to say. And when you sleep at night, I hope you think of me. I hope it brings a tear to your eye when you think of everything we could have been.
Mic drop.
Oh,
I love that.
I want to know so bad who it's about because I actually don't know. It could have been about literally, it could have been like 12 different boys from high school. It could have been about 12 different girls from high school. I don't know. Listen,
it's about payback.
It's about payback, and that's all we need to know. Like this line about the 4-leaf clover.
That one really got me.
Like, I wish that was an Easter egg. Like,
you
maybe
waste your wish.
Maybe the person was Irish. Like, that's a possibility. But I don't think it's that deep. I think I was literally just like, fuck you. I think we're pretty equal in our angst, to be honest. Like,
oh yeah, for sure. Yours was giving me like if two of the VeggieTales characters had beef with each other. And one wrote a poem about it. It was very much that to me, you know? Because I'm over here calling Kelly a bitch, and you're like, if you pray, no, God doesn't hear. Okay, the next poem I have. We're jumping to 2009. Mm-hmm. So I was born in 89, and this was written 11 days after my birthday. So I'd be 20. So I'm out of high school.
Wow.
I'm still doing my thing. I went back to eating disorder treatment one more time after this. But
and you've come out at this point, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
I came out. I came out to my parents when I was 17. At the same time as I told them I was probably addicted to cocaine and had an eating disorder. So I just did the big triple whammy. I threw it at them and I said, pick one to be mad about. Yeah, I'm just the wonder child.
Which one were they most mad about?
They weren't worried. They weren't mad about any of it. Well, they were a little mad that I stole money for the drugs. But they were like, we need to get him help immediately. Find treatment center. You know, that was the protocol at the time.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so it was okay, and I'm very grateful. But this is a lot. We could do a whole episode on this. The first official treatment center I went to was actually in California, but I don't count it because I was there for 4 days and I ran away with this girl named Leanne who was addicted to methamphetamine.
Okay. Always a good choice.
I loved her. I hope she's okay.
Yeah.
And I was in Whittier, California, because I told my parents I would not go to treatment anywhere that wasn't in California, because I was a brat. Seriously, I was a brat. And I idolized these Hollywood stars doing this delinquent stuff. Yeah. But I will say, we were the first people to ever get away, because I was 17, so it was adolescent. But it was residential, and we were the first people to ever get away for more than 45 minutes. Wow. And can you guess how long I was gone for?
I'm going to say 72 hours.
That's a really good guess. You gave me good credit. I never went back.
Oh,
so
shit.
I smashed that record.
You were gone forever. Okay. Did you go home?
It's such a story. Okay. It's kind of crazy.
Well, you don't have to share the whole story if you don't want to.
I'll give you the quick bullet points, which make it glorious. So I had a aunt by proxy, like my uncle's wife's sister, who lived in the area. She lived in an apartment, but she lived in a gated community. After a day's fiasco. The getaway story is great too, but I'll save that for another time. I ended up staying with her for a couple days, and my dad is someone who's very controlling, tries to be intimidating, blah blah blah, and she's a very don't push me around kind of person, and she wanted to just have neutrality in it because she kind of understood where I was coming from as being just a troubled teen, and then also knew that my dad wanted me to get healthy, but for him to be able to pick me up from her place, she would have to open the gate, and she told him she wouldn't do it. because that's her getting involved.
Yeah.
So I stayed there for a couple of days, and then eventually my dad flew out, and then I went back home.
Okay.
And then after a couple more months of same old, that's when I went to Rogers. So, yeah.
You glazed over the getaway story. What did you go on foot?
Yes. So
Okay.
the way that this place worked was not locked, like not a locked facility, but they take your suitcase when you get there, and you just put all your clothes like in your little drawer in your bin or whatever. So what Leanne and I did, part of our grand plan, was we layered up. So I probably had 5 pairs of pants on, like 8 shirts, 6 pairs of socks, bunch of underwear. And we timed it for like 5 a.m. right during a shift change. So there was only one person on staff, and it was when we were supposed to be sleeping. And I just remember she comes around the corner to my room. It's like, we're like, are we doing it? Like the sun's coming up, it's rising. And then we just decided to do it. We open the door. The person hears us and sees us. And she looks over and she just goes, "Don't run." And we just booked
You guys
it.
just booked it.
Yeah, she had this Hello Kitty blanket wrapped around her.
Oh my gosh,
and
this is like haunting, JP.
I will never forget it because she threw it in the air behind her.
Oh
Like,
my
and
gosh.
it like wove through the air as like this victory flag of
Okay,
Hello Kitty.
this is like Girl Interrupted, the sequel. Like this
I've
is
lived that life.
this
like,
is crazy.
It was so good. That's why, like, if I feel like I should write a memoir because there's just little things. But yeah, so the Hello Kitty flag of freedom was flying,
Yes.
and we literally ran for like about a mile and a half just down the street. We're in Woodbury, California. We're in a very like Latino populated area, and we found our way into this trailer park. We just randomly banged on some dude's door. He opens up his door. There's like beer cans everywhere. His other friend's asleep, like on the couch of his trailer. He does not speak English, and we're trying to get him to call a cab for us. And eventually, like, we're able to communicate, and he like pulls out a business card, and it's this Hispanic cab company, and we called them, and he caught a car for us. And that was actually the only reason we got away, is because they involved the police as soon as because it's
Of
children.
course, yeah.
And they monitor pretty much every standard cab line, but since this one was very like niche and only used within a community, we took a cab like an hour away to her mom's house, where she snuck in her mom's house while her mom was showering, stole a bunch of cash, paid the cab driver. He dropped us off at Starbucks. We went in the bathroom, took all our clothes off, asked him for a bag, put our stuff in there, and went out with no money.
Wow. Oh my goodness. And you
Yep.
that's what a wild story.
It is so wild. Yep, and then there's more to it, but yeah, like I said, it would take a whole episode. But yeah, so I was really in the like, I did not give a fuck.
Yeah.
And I can definitely stand by that. I was living just to, like, I don't know, feel good all the time. I remember that I just had so much discomfort within my body and my mind that I could not handle being like sober, and being, I don't know, not engaging in some sort of maladaptive behavior.
And now you've been sober for 2+ years, correct?
It's almost 3 years.
Yeah.
It'll be 3 years in a month. And that's sober from alcohol, and I've been in recovery for my eating disorder for over 12 years.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
congratulations. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, you obviously inspire me so much in both of those realms. We've talked about, how we share a lot of commonalities in both of those realms. And I talk about a lot on this podcast where I can see my eating disorder in my diary entries. I've never been to treatment for it. I very, very recently just admitted that I have been struggling with disordered eating I found it in my first journal that I mentioned, that from 1998 when I'm 10 years old. All I'm talking about is how Courtney's thighs are smaller than mine, and how do I get smaller thighs, and I could do those Weight Watchers points like Mom does, and I start counting I'm literally tracking crackers and hard-boiled egg
counting
and
calories
when I'm 10.
It's so tragic to hear about that when it's a child. Like,
it's not only tragic, but it's fucking infuriating, because like Shiva's daughter just turned 8, and I look at her and I'm like, please don't let, like, I'm just like, do not allow any adult to fuck up this child, because, like, I look at her just 2 years younger than I was at that time, and I'm like, she's so pure. Like, she's so pure and innocent. And I know that I was also pure and innocent. But when I read my diary from that time, I definitely didn't know it when I was 10. I did not think of myself as pure and innocent. I thought of myself as a project that needed to be fixed. Mm-hmm. I thought of myself as something that was broken that needed to be fixed. And, like, that guts me. It absolutely guts me. Because, like, no child should ever think that. And I think a lot of children really do. Like,
yeah.
Like, when
especially generationally, us being from kind of the same nook.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, same thing here. I remember from it, like, as early back as I have memories, I can remember the importance of appearance and intelligence and this and that, and my mom always making comments on my sister's weight, and so it gets ingrained in you just inherently, because a child is just a sponge, you know, and they're so susceptible. Yeah. That I don't know. It's tragic.
Yeah.
That's why as a generation we're unlearning generational trauma, and if we do have offspring, we're not passing it on.
Knock on wood. Let's hope not. I don't feel super positive about the next generation based on how things are going politically right now, and just knowing how many young men are, like, pro Andrew Tate and shit. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, what's going on? So I don't know if I share that optimism, but I also know that we have to. I know that we have to believe that we people in our generation who do choose to have kids are gonna, and just collectively parenting too, we're gonna hopefully do it differently. And I mean, I think
with time.
With time
will tell, but
For sure.
I do agree with you. I don't think this current generation you're referring to, that the Andrew Tate lovers, like, I don't think they quite count. Like,
yeah, I mean,
I feel like a lot of the stuff we're talking about, like, really just came into the center of conversation within the past 5 years, you know?
Yeah.
And again, thanks, internet. But at the same time, you know, it's painful to kind of have that eye-opening moment in your life and be like, wow, I'm dysregulated, and this is why. I can identify it. But
yeah, for sure.
You know, it's the way to improve. So okay, so you said you wanted a love poem.
I'd love to hear a love poem.
It
can be a heartbreak poem too. It doesn't have to be just love, but I'm so curious to know when I was like, I have a request. I'm so curious to know what you thought I was going to request too, because I think you should read whatever that thought was too.
Oh, okay.
I have so many favorites of yours. Like, I have so many favorites.
Yeah. Gosh, you're making me blush, and no one can even see. They can probably hear it. The microphone's just like heating up like a tea kettle. Okay, so this one's called La Petite Morte. I actually wrote a more recent poem called La Petite Mort too, and you know, it means the little death, which is the French slang for orgasm. So
I love this. I love the
fun fact.
I love the fun fact. Great.
November 5th, 2008. I guess I'll give a slight author's note preamble. This is about my first love. His name was Jonah. He was an incredible individual that was unfortunately just, like, plagued by generational schizophrenia. And he had very, very intensive suicidal ideation. And, like, I really, like, fell in love with this dude. And it's very hard to be in love with someone who, like, wants to die. So, yeah, I wrote about that a lot. But he introduced me to this concept of... He basically introduced me to the idea, just the autonomy behind your own life. There's this organization, I forget exactly what it's called. It's something related to a bus, because I wrote a poem about it, and it's called Bus Stop. But basically, it's just advocating that people should have the authority to make their own end-of-life decisions, whether or not you're terminal or this or that. Like, I don't know.
Like, do you mean
suicide
in regards
is so
to mental illness?
stigmatized. Not just for, I mean, I think it's a very, very gray area, and that's why it's a hard thing to talk about, because never would I say, like, I'm an advocate for, you know, people killing themselves. But I do think that if you are suffering and you don't think there's another way out of your pain, I don't know. Like, I get it.
Yeah. I mean,
And
you're
Joan-
right. You're right that everybody deserves the right to their own autonomy and their own decisions, for sure.
and
Like,
I'm a big supporter of medical aid in dying, which is just basically that, but it only applies to people with terminal illness.
yeah, I understand. Yeah.
And even that is something that's hugely contested here in the States. But in Europe, it's like a it's a non-issue. So there's a lot of things we're very behind the ball on, obviously politically, and we're going the wrong direction for some reason. But yeah, it just was, I don't know. It was I was always drawn to very sick people because I was very sick myself. And sick people kind of find each other. It's just what happens, you know? All right, let me read this poem. La Petite Morte. It won't be long before my bones separate. Tendons dissolve like burnt clothes to be trampled until feet run ashy and gray. A symbolic plea that I can't answer, though I try to live golden with a fear of anything running too heavy or collecting in my nerve endings, making me take the place of the day as I rise like a heaving chest out of bed. I caught your eyes in the mirror. They reminded me of pears and that time you swore how easy things would end up. We were like a garden and would grow, but let me sort it out. You can't bloom if the seed was never planted. Instead, you stuck it in my ear and expected my head to curl like leaves under the sun. But I grew to understand how sometimes your mind failed, and in the warmest moments, winter will always come again, and you'll disintegrate emotionally, leaving me to pull my own hand out of the cold. Mistakes were made, but it wasn't me forgetting not to drink so much. It was your fingertips, even your circulation, pumping indifference through the body, when for months I gnawed to replace that redundant babble with an understanding that I do believe you, and when the time comes, maybe I will be so inclined to separate my arms into ladders for you to climb, us finally alone at the top to feel the slight of death.
Wow.
I was so in love with this man. I was like, we're gonna die together and die young, like Romeo and Juliet.
How does it feel to read a poem about him today? Like,
I got goosebumps.
Yeah, me too. I mean, me too. Yeah.
It was
I mean, take a beat.
I will say, so 2 out of the 3 people I've ever loved in my life are no longer in this world, and they committed suicide, and so to read it, having that perspective, is definitely like heartbreaking, you know?
Yeah.
Because I very much wanted to be like the reason why that person didn't want to die, or that wanted to stay on this earth. You can very much hear that in that poem.
You wanted to save him for sure.
And if I couldn't, then like we could go out together, and it would be so poetic, and that's what I wanted.
I mean, it would definitely be very poetic, and also I'm glad you're still here at UP.
I'm glad I'm still here too.
Yeah. So Jonah is not still here.
No.
What do you think Jonah would think of you, like, 10, 15 years later, reading a poem you wrote about him on a podcast? Like, what do you think his reaction would be?
He would blush, and he would be so embarrassed, but ultimately he would be super supportive.
Yeah.
He was a really good guy. Yeah.
Oh,
He was a really good guy, and I feel, at the time, even going to like therapy back in the 2000s was very stigmatized. Like, you watch media from that time too, and it's like, oh, you have a shrink?
Yeah.
And it's like, so I'm so glad that we have broken down a lot of the stigma around that stuff.
Yeah.
But for me at the time, you know, just trying to make sense of someone who's living with this disorder that, you know, I don't have any experience with was very, I don't know, it just was like, it was very much just being like in a hot and cold relationship, you know? And so it's like when you factor in the emotional concept of like, I love you, and sometimes you love me back, and other times you act like I don't exist. It's like, yeah. It's very, very hurtful and sad, but yeah.
Yeah. Tumultuous and excruciating, and also, you know, the
it
love
makes
of
me
your
sad
life.
to think about the fact that two of my biggest loves, like, I'll never be able to have that like moment in my life where what if we got to try again, you know, and it was the right timing. I think about that all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm glad that they are at peace.
Yeah. I'm glad that they're at peace, and I'm glad that they have, especially Jonah here, has this opportunity to like, you know, live here for another moment. It's just through this poem, and not just because you read it, but because you wrote it. Because you wrote it, and so therefore he'll always exist on that page, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the most...
Like I said... Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, I think it's one of the most beautiful things we can do to honor people is to write about them, like good and bad. Even like Kelly. Yeah, you wrote about Kelly, and it's not the same way to honor, but it's like, I still want to remember you because you changed me, you know?
Yeah.
And
I absolutely agree with you. And you mentioned undercurrent earlier, and there was a recent workshop we did where we were examining poems, and one of them had a name in the title. And I just remember Des focusing on that a lot, and one of the prompts was, you know, put in, like, name someone in your poem or in the title. And I was like, oh, is that like taboo? Like, are people afraid to do that? Because like, I'd be just putting it all out there. So I guess
I think it's poet's choice. Like, if you're brave enough to do it, then sure, why not?
I guess I've just been very uninhibited in that area.
I love it. I mean, but what an honor it is for somebody to be in the title of a love poem. Like, that's, I mean, what other, like, I literally can't think of something that's more generous than to literally put someone's name into a love poem. You're
making me pivot right now too, because Jonah got a couple poems with his name in them, but David, who is the one who is still with us in this world, got so many. I would say 15. Here, I'm gonna do a David search in the doc of everything.
Let's see it.
His name appears 19 times. These are poems.
How many of those 19 are in the title?
I'm about to give you it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Oh my God,
10,
JP, this is your next chapbook.
11.
Literally the Book of David.
Oh my God, isn't that already a biblical thing?
Yeah, that's why it's awesome.
Okay, we'll reclaim it.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so there's 10 poems with David's name in them. And I will say there was like David part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5, part 6, part 7.
Yeah.
But then there's others. There's David in the dry spells. David hears Michelangelo. And hang on. For David, nothing is ever lost or could be. So those are the 3 without numbers.
That's amazing. I'm seriously like, this should be a collection, just poems for David, poems about David, the Book of David, whatever it is. Like,
well, I've got to read one.
Yeah, please do.
Because they're from 2008, and I don't know if I want a Book of David from 2008 surfacing in the world.
That's fair.
You know?
That's fair.
But I have to kind of figure out which one. Out of the ones that I gave you with the title, Did any of those speak to you?
I like David and the Dry Spells, just because that sounds like kind of, it's intriguing. But pick whatever one you think.
No, I'll read this one. I will give preamble. David and I met in eating disorder treatment.
Okay.
Great place to meet singles. Treatment, let me tell you. It's exactly where you want to start a healthy relationship. With someone else in treatment.
Almost as good as an NA room, honestly.
David lives in Bowling Green, Kentucky now.
Yep.
Originally from Long Island. He moved here to be with me. We're obviously no longer together and haven't been together. He ended up cheating on me after moving here to be with me. And it's this whole complicated thing. But anyways, when I met David, he was engaged to be married to this girl, I forget her name. And he was raised Orthodox Jewish. So very, very religious. So I was his first boyfriend. Okay. I was a lot of people's first boyfriends.
Ripe with drama.
A lot of people's first boyfriends, a lot of people's first, you know what.
Yeah.
I used to call myself the straight boy conqueror. I'm so serious. It was like moths to a lamp.
Yeah. I mean, you're a beautiful human. I can see why people fall in love with you. I get it.
Sometimes it wasn't just love. They were like, I just want to know what a finger in my butt feels.
I mean, don't we all? Like, doesn't everyone a little bit?
I'm like, you do have a girlfriend. They're like, yeah, I asked her. It's cool. I'm like, okay, let's go. All right. Caveat to David and the Dry Spells. 2009. August 18th, so 4 days after my birthday in 2009. So this was, I guess, this was around the same time. All right. You, my onion, are not breakable, but can be peeled so easily. My vision goes with your layers. You always said to eat more carrots, but no, I never obliged. Even though we lack canals, someday we will spread like dandelions, like a whore before Christmas with 3 kids back home. These days are not the final solution that pulled at your family's hierarchy, dragging each by the ear, testing their will of conversion. Like them, you will be strong. Your Shoah takes the form of a gutted bull. Flies all around make both of us sick, unable to keep the hallucination of normality staked through the hands, the feet, and the brain, as if we floated until our stomachs formed into flasks. The prognosis was anything but holy. Damn, outsiders would sing as we played rib cages like xylophones to the words of little blood mouths, each sick and alone. We've seen pharaohs don themselves in artful rifles to speak at high priests. The contradiction of pain and pleasure would wake with us every day in the corners of our eyes like soft nightmares. I'd look at you and rub them all aside, kiss your face, and ask some saint for a gallon of liquid gold. If we are ever apart, let plaster be the beginning of a sculpture that echoes. When the throat of genocide finally opens and 6 million souls flood out, we'll understand how not to identify, letting concord prevail as is. Symmetrical, rough, damper than the clouds, replete with impulse in the skin you chew from around your nails, nervously, feverishly. One day, you'll gnaw your fingertips right off, oblivious as blades of grass in the dough that lies within, trying to recall the place where you were worshipped unto death.
Beautiful, beautiful reading, JP. Wow.
Thank you.
Wow.
Shoah is Yiddish for Holocaust.
I was literally gonna ask that. I wrote that down.
Identify that. So
I gotta
that's why
say,
I mentioned his Judaism, just because it's in the poem.
I gotta say, this is maybe the first poem that's ever been written that starts with "you, my onion." And I love the image. But I was like,
say, as a chef
I
and
was like, no,
former culinary,
that's a good one. No, that was beautiful. I was completely immersed in that reading. You're turning into such a brilliant performer. I know that's something that's new for you, but you've been practicing. I mean, like practicing heavy for the last year to perform. So I would love. One thing we haven't heard from you yet is like a recent poem. So I'd love for you to look through your archives for like maybe your favorite recent poem that you've written, and maybe we'll wrap up with that one.
This one is called Wilderness Treatment Center. It's obviously within the same vein of a lot of things that we've been discussing today. And I was inspired to write this poem because of one of our other poet friends, Heidi, writing about one of their experiences with being forcibly sent to treatment as a teenager. And I was like, I believe that these conversations need to be had, because if you don't talk about it, it'll just stay in a dark corner. And I don't know.
I didn't know that background for this poem, so I didn't know that's what inspired it. But that's really interesting.
It was gonna happen eventually.
Yeah. Was
I'm
this
one of those people that can like tap into like how I was kind of feeling at a time and write about it sometimes. I don't know. It's kind of weird. But
was this one of the like subjects that you mentioned earlier that like you kind of felt like you couldn't write about for a long time, and then all of a sudden you could?
Yep. Yeah. This is the first poem that I've written that's like directly about a treatment experience.
Okay. Cool.
Yes. And this is when I was sent to wilderness treatment in Kalispell, Montana, which I'd never heard of. And it was the middle of winter, and I participated in a 22-day cross-country ski trip outside in the middle of Glacier National Park.
What?
It was badass, and it was so much fun, and it was hard, and it was wonderful.
Yeah. Wow.
Maybe I'll find you a picture of that. Okay. This is called Wilderness Treatment Center. 4-door, 3-row SUV, packed in raisin to raisin. Everyone drives a truck here. Montana's glacial breath. I'm trapped in Kali's spell. Soggy leaves hiding under hoods. Natural body warmth extends from armpits and groin. Hands over forehead are a kind of veil, one you wear again. Shoving blue fingers down the front of my pants. Changing into dry socks before sleep as protection from asuras and their offspring. Mid-season, governance of time takes a tolerance break. I'm not mucking stalls today. Awoke with an axe and masters said swing. Flame consumes tinder. Attempt to sprint on ice, graceless as a cavity. I'm hurting more than it's hurting you, though this ain't a party, just a gathering of well-placed fools. Snow blindness indifferent whether eyes open or close. Blink it away. Icy pastures taught me viscosity, how to tame a tarp gently atop snow, slowly, rhythmically tamp milk powder until it is weight-bearing and bloodied. Reminiscent of plates Mom used to marinate her steaks in summertime.
I was like prepping myself for that last line because I have read this poem before, and that last line fucking got me, and it got me again. I'm so
Gotcha.
I'm so glad that you waited to write about this till you could write about it like this. You know what I mean? Like, this could have been a totally different poem if you wrote it a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Not to say it wouldn't be good. It would just be different. And I think waiting until, like, this moment in time where you genuinely felt ready to write about it made for such a beautiful, expansive... Like, that's like the... Like, I really see this poem as being so... kind of all-encompassing of this, like, despite like the details you gave us at the beginning, without those details, I would still feel kind of everything you said about it. You know what I mean? Yeah,
Well,
I love it.
you.
It's such a goodie.
Huge compliment.
It's such a goodie. Are you going to submit this one, or is this one out?
This one is not out, and I have not submitted it anywhere. Because that would make it too real. No, I've just been mostly focused on family stuff lately. You know this, and I'll just say this for context for podcast. My mom was diagnosed with primary progressive aphasia 4 years ago now, and is finally at the point where we're like getting worried about her driving and stuff like that. So I've had to be a lot more hands-on, and I took her to a nail appointment this morning. Like, I love doing it. Like, so don't get me wrong. I'm not complaining at all, but it's hard, when like your best friend is losing part of their ability to communicate.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I know you've written some beautiful poems about that as well. And, we will be sharing at the end of this episode how anybody can find JP's work, because obviously it's been published a lot, and JP's also working on a book and other projects, and is kind of all around the interwebs with lots of beautiful poetry. So we'll definitely, and I'll link it in the bottom too, of where people can find these poems, because I don't want people to miss out on anything that we just don't have time to read today. Because if we did, we would. I mean, you've written so many poems. We could be recording this podcast for 12 hours.
Too many poems.
No, there's no such thing as too many poems.
And I want to hear more of yours. Like, we need that.
Well, I do want to sort of scratch the surface on just one more sort of big topic that you write about, because I know you as a writer who really explores, like I said again at the beginning, explores these subjects that are heavy hitters that a lot of people don't even touch. And we've touched on a lot of them today. We've talked about your eating disorder recovery. We've talked about sobriety. We've talked about, coming out, being, queer and trans and being, in the political hellscape that we're in today. We've talked about love and heartbreak and all of that, a little bit of your Catholic upbringing, which I mean are some of my favorite poems by you. You've got some really dynamic ones.
And then there's religious trauma.
Yeah. And then there's one other topic that I know, is the center of one of your book projects that you're working on, and that is your adoption. And
Correctamundo.
Yeah. And I'd love to hear a little bit about why that is important for you to write about, and I would love to hear a poem on that subject.
Oh, well, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't throw it in my bio, but I found, especially revisiting my work, that I have written about being an adoptee a lot, because my mom and my dad, the people who adopted me, I consider them my mom and my dad. It's no different than if we were biological or non-biological. It's never been any different. I was legally adopted when I was 12 hours old, and my parents they went through a legal adoption agency. It's how you did it in the 80s.
Yeah.
And this is all because my mom actually couldn't get pregnant. So she miscarried 3 times before they even turned to that option. So me being in this world and with my family, and then them having the resources to keep me alive through everything, like, it's all meant to be. And it happened exactly how it was supposed to. But you're kind of left in this place of like, okay, well, you hear your friends talk about their, I'm half Greek and half German and this and that, and I just don't know. I don't know exactly what I am. I don't know my medical history. There's these things that I don't know, or there's certain things that I found out about my in utero experience later in life that I definitely think affected like my brain wiring. And so it was this whole smorgasbord of resentment mixed with gratitude, and those are two very oppositional feelings. So yeah, this poem is called Pink, and it was written in 2008 in July. I held my tongue until it became fistfuls of blood, offered it as a sacrifice to the woman whose abortion I avoided because she was yellow and stale, too pathetic to cut me out like a cyst, though I was inevitable, constructing myself in the womb with pieces of shell and glue she would swallow. If her face was ever sacred, then I never worshipped. New life was thrust upon me like piles of fruit. Instantly I was lost between crosses and crossed eyes that all seemed to stare so violently. At 9, God came to me as a tree to set himself on fire, hoping that I would follow in excellence. But I had already held arthritic hands in my own, watched my grandfathers both become water when we spread their ashes thin, and wondered, where was he then? If only I had known that this is reality, everything earned would be lost, like the first snow melting, taking all the glory with it, or yesterday when I opened myself like a book and buried secrets between my ribs never to be recovered. Sometimes I think about 15 when I stomached denial like it was flesh, staining myself with grapes pressed open, never to wash away despite scalding showers or the pumice that slowly carved out my figure. I could resent the baseball that shattered my nose, maybe empathize with the cancer that spread in my mother's throat, but instead I kissed them both gently and closed my eyes, not in prayer, but in the subtlety that what I cannot see does not exist.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you.
Wow, that one's...
This is one of those weird poems that I feel like I kind of wrote to myself in the future.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to be able to look back on how I felt. And I used to have a strong resentment towards my birth mother because she used cocaine in utero. So that's what some of this is referencing when I write about it. And so I was like, you're the reason I'm all fucked up and have all these fucking issues. So it's like, just the blame game. But as someone who is healing and learning, it's like I know now that she was just trying her best, and I am lucky to be here.
Yeah. I mean, we're lucky that you get to be here too.
Yeah.
It's funny because like one of the questions that I ask pretty much all my guests is like, if you could go back to that age, any of these ages, and like tell that version of yourself something, like what would you say? And I almost am like, I don't even really feel like I need to ask JP that question because I feel like it's been answered like in the poems. Like I feel like I know in like, maybe I don't, but I just feel, and it's like maybe I don't have to know because I feel so like I can tell how soothed the certain parts of you are through, again, not only reading these poems today, but just writing them at all. And I think that that's such a beautiful gift that you've all... Getting emotional over here, but I just think it's such a beautiful gift that you offer, like, not only the world, me, anybody who's listening, but yourself in all versions of yourself. I think it's such a beautiful gift. And I'm so glad that you grabbed onto it and said, I'm going to join Unfold and I'm going to fucking write poems. Like, I'm so glad that you did that.
Me too.
Let's thank the poet gods for sending us JP at the time that we could all be together, I think...
For real.
I
really needed community at that point in my life, and I found it. And I... no regrets, right? But there was such a long period of time that I deprived myself of an outlet and was turning to other things. Like I said, I've been sober from alcohol for almost 3 years, and it's a lot easier to just stop by the liquor store on your way home than it is to sit down and confront your emotions. Yeah.
Preach.
Barb.
Like literally story of my life. Literally, right? Barb.
And when you live in Kentucky, if you drive 5 minutes in any direction, you're going to pass 5 liquor stores. So, I don't know. It was pandemic. I didn't care. But now it's like, it's great to just feel like I have the stability to broach subjects and honor them, you know? Like, I do feel like there's a huge honoring process in writing and why we do what we do. And it's, you know, not every writer is like this. There's a lot of narcissistic a-holes out there, but I think a true writer is writing, because it's a form of catharsis, but we need to have an outlet to just be able to start to conceptualize how we feel and how we interpret the world, you know?
Yeah, well said.
And so then when you
definitely.
find people with those commonalities that have also experienced things the same or view things the same or feel things the same, it's just a beautiful thing. So yes, big shout out to Unfold, shout out to the poetry community, shout out to everyone that like gets out there and uses their voice for the good.
I guess because, like I said, the question that I always ask, I feel like there's a different question that I think I'd like to ask you specifically, just based on that, what you just said, is I guess for the person who, like, an example would be somebody who messages me and says, I really kind of want to sign up for one of your workshops, or like I want to go to this open mic or whatever, but I'm just like not really a poet, or like I just don't really have a writing practice, you know, and they're already kind of downplaying their future essentially because they just kind of don't believe in themselves, or just because they think it's something else than what it is. I guess, like, what was the turning point for you, or like what would you maybe say to somebody like that in terms of, like, you've mentioned
you are
that
withholding freedom and happiness from yourself. And I think that there's no wrong way to create art unless it's intentionally created to be like harmful or insulting, you know? And that's the beautiful thing, is poetry is art. And you know, Unfold slogan, every attempt is a poem, and I really do believe that. Like, I think those scribbles on the back of your hand, or those musings in your notes app, like that is poetry, and you get to take it, and that is your gift, and you can mold it into whatever you want. And whether that is a daily writing practice or you want to just try it at a workshop, like, I have never found it's a more gentle place to land than in a writing workshop. And that is,
love that.
It's true though. You know, you get to be around people, like I said, that are just like-minded, and having that just right out of the gate, and not having to have that kind of social anxiety of, are these people gonna like me? Will they do they care who I am, like, as a writer, as a person? I've heard people that are, you know, I know them by first name basis. They're essentially strangers, but literally bare their souls. And I find so much beauty in just like that connectivity. And it's not like I'm gonna go out and be like, oh, this, you know, Mary F on Zoom this day did this, you know? So it's like, we get to share in like this really beautiful practice together. And so my advice would be, like, if it feels like you want to keep it to yourself, then start doing it for you and then branch out. But if you're looking for a place to land, like writing workshops, in-person community, they're gonna open you or welcome you with open arms, like 100%.
Yeah.
I don't really know many people that are more generous than like artists.
I love that. That's such a, I mean, thank you so much for that answer. And I do feel like you and I could talk for 17 years, and sometimes we do.
We do.
I do. We are going to
had to schedule additional sessions just to yap, you guys.
Yeah. We are going to wrap up our episode. I want to thank JP so much for coming to read poems, for being my friend, for being so supportive of my work, for being such a kind human, for listening to me, for never, ever judging me for anything I've said in the history of our time together. But mostly I want to thank you for your beautiful words and for being courageous and sharing them with us today. I also want to say to anyone listening that if you are somebody who has heeded JP's words today and would like to join a writing community, there's lots of links at the bottom of this episode. I also work as a writing coach and editor, and I help people achieve their writing goals every single day. You can find me at www.doulaofwords.com. And JP, where can folks find you and your beautiful work?
At www.thorn.jp. That is thorn.jp.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well,
thank you so much for having me. I wanted to say you are awesome, and as someone who has worked with Yoda for, I would say, almost a year now too, yes, go for it.
thank you so much, JP. All right, big love, everybody.